NFL draft is a big event for every team, but the moments following the draft are just as important because for the hundreds of players that were just drafted, there are hundreds more waiting to be picked up in the undrafted free agent pool. Now, the Chargers have a great history of undrafted free agent players like Antonio Gates, Malcolm Floyd, and Austin Eckler. So is there a chance that one of these 11 defensive undrafted free agents can have a great career just like these other guys? Well, let's find out. Let me tell you about these guys, and let's start with Brevin Allen, the outside linebacker from Campbell. Brevin Allen was an unranked high school recruit out of North Carolina and worked his way onto the field at Campbell, and in 2021 he was the Big South Defensive Player of the Year, and in his career he had 148 tackles, 38 tackles for loss, 20.5 sacks, 1 interception, 3 forced fumbles, 5 pass deflections. I mean, this guy is so productive, and he's on Bruce Feldman's freaks list because of his natural athleticism. He needs to work on his pass rush arsenal though, because I've only really seen him like bull rush or long arm tackles, but this is a great athlete that you can coach up, and he could definitely earn himself a roster spot or at least a practice squad spot while learning behind guys like Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa. Now, next on the list, Tyler Baker-Williams, cornerback from NC State. Tyler was a high-rated prospect also out of North Carolina, and in high school he played safety, outside linebacker, and wide receiver. So Baker-Williams played all over at NC State. He saw time at safety, running back, nickel, and outside corner, and he finished his career with 153 tackles, 13 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, 5 interceptions, 22 pass deflections, and a forced fumble. Now, the Chargers listed him at safety, and that's probably because of his RAS score. He had a 4.67 40 time, which is the biggest reason he went undrafted, but he has good instincts and a good understanding of routes, high football IQ in zone defense. If this guy has a good camp and makes the roster, he could have a career pan out just like Adrian Phillips did, former University of Texas undrafted free agent for the Chargers. Now, next up, another cornerback, Cam Brown from Ohio State. Cam was the 6th best player coming out of Missouri in high school, where he played wide receiver and cornerback. He struggled on and off with injuries during his career, as he only played 36 games in 5 years. He had 54 tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, 14 pass deflections, and 1 interception in his career at Ohio State. He's physical and a willing run defender, which not many cornerbacks are. He's an instinctive player and takes good angles to the ball carrier, which as Chargers fans we know is a big deal. And he has the ability to knock the ball out of the wide receiver's hands. Cam Brown has a lot of potential, just needs to stay healthy and be more consistent when he is on the field, which is hard to do when it's so tough for you just to get on the field in the first place. You can't really establish a nice rhythm. I think he's got a lot of development to do, but give him time on the practice squad. I think he could develop into a pretty good player in an NFL secondary. Now let's get into the big guys a little bit. Jerrod Clark, defensive lineman from Coastal Carolina. Jerrod Clark was a 3-star high school recruit out of Massachusetts, and he was initially a tight end. He redshirted his first year, then got injured the next year, and then transitioned to defensive tackle by putting on 85 pounds. Now he is a 6'3", 334-pound dog with a quick twitch, and he fires off the snap with a really fast first step for a big man. He also gets his pads low, has really good leverage for a guy who just transitioned into this position. He eats up blockers. He can hold his ground in the middle of the field like his life depends on it. Doesn't offer much as a pass rusher, but if he can develop some moves, then he could become a nice rotational lineman. And even if he doesn't though, I think that Jerrod Clark could be a nice zero-tech defensive lineman for the Chargers. Even if he doesn't make this roster, I am pretty confident that he's going to get on some other team's roster. I like this guy. Next up, Nathan East, the linebacker from Samford. Nathan was a 2-star high school recruit, safety out of Alabama, and transitioned to linebacker at Samford. He had 361 tackles, 18.5 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, 1 interception. This is another guy who had a great RAS score, but he doesn't have great size as he's listed at 6'1", 229 pounds, but he should fit right in with the linebacker group that the Chargers currently have. Deion Henley, Kenneth Murray, Eric Kendricks, Nick Neiman, all these guys are athletic, but they're not huge guys. He could get on the practice squad, but it's tough for me to see him sneaking his way onto the 53-man roster unless he really shows out in camp, which is totally possible. Any one of these guys can just turn on a different gear and start turning heads in camp or preseason. It's just that it seems as though anything that Nathan East can do, Deion Henley and Eric Kendricks can do as well, so the skill set may be a bit redundant. But if he makes the roster, then he would be a contributor on special teams immediately. Now let's talk about Andrew Farmer, the outside linebacker from Lane College. Andrew Farmer was not a highly recruited player coming out of Florida, and he played all along the defensive line during his time at Lane College. Had 114 tackles, 44 tackles for loss, 17.5 sacks, 5 pass deflections, and 2 forced fumbles. He led all of D2 players in tackles for loss last year, and he was the HBCU sack leader. He's had a lot of production, and he looks like a pretty good athlete. He even caught a touchdown in 2021. He usually wins with speed, and he needs to develop an explosive first step and add some more pass rush moves to his arsenal. This is kind of like your undrafted free agent version of Tuli Tuipulotu. Didn't have much in the way of competition, but when he played in the Hula Bowl, he took advantage and he earned himself a chance in the NFL. He's going to be in competition with Brevin Allen for that 5th outside linebacker spot on the roster, or even a practice squad spot. Next up, AJ Finley, the safety from Mississippi. Now, AJ was a 3-star prospect out of Alabama, where he played running back and safety. He had 245 tackles, 8.5 tackles for loss, 8 interceptions, 21 pass deflections, and 2 forced fumbles over 4 years at Ole Miss. He's got good range and instincts, and he is a run defender that does well closing in on the ball carriers. Another guy who takes good angles. I like that. He's best working downhill and with all the action in front of him so he can make a break on the ball. He's 6'3" and pretty thin for a safety, but he is more than willing to throw himself into the pile, which is a good and a bad thing because sometimes he can be a bit reckless. This is a 3-year starter who has made game-changing plays at Ole Miss, and with Nasir Adderley gone, AJ Finley can absolutely make this roster if he shows out in camp. He'll be competing for that 5th safety spot with some other guys on this list, but this is another guy, kind of reminds me a little bit of Dexter McLeod, if you remember him, you're a longtime Chargers fan, about 6 years ago. Next up, Mikel Jones, linebacker from Syracuse. Mikel was a 4-star high school prospect out of Florida, and at Syracuse, he had 299 tackles, 22 tackles for loss, 8.5 sacks, 4 interceptions, and 3 forced fumbles. He is a 2-time captain, 3-time All-ACC selection. He has flashes of really good play in reading and reacting to run plays and fluid movement when he drops back in zone. On tape, he looks to be a fast and athletic linebacker with loose hips and good closing speed, but he had a terrible RAS score in every regard. He's been compared to Zaire Franklin, the 2018 Syracuse linebacker who has now been on the Colts for 6 years. I think it's an uphill battle for him to make the 53 just based on the Chargers' preference in linebackers. It seems like that RAS score is a pretty big deal for them, but if he plays well in the preseason, they may be forced to keep him on the roster, or some other team might pick him up. Next up, Terrance Lang, defensive lineman from Colorado. Terrance was ranked as the 3rd best high school athlete in California. At Colorado, he had 91 tackles, 19.5 tackles for loss, 8 sacks, 7 pass deflections, and 2 blocked kicks. He is a huge defensive lineman at 6'7" and can get his hands up and bat down passes, and can do the same to field goals and PATs on special teams. He is tenacious and gives high effort while also playing at a pretty good pad level for being so dang tall. He could add some weight to his huge frame in order to hold up better at the next level, but the Chargers don't have anyone this tall on their defensive line right now, so if he can time passes well enough to bat some down, he could find his way onto this roster, and if not, he would definitely earn a practice squad spot because the Chargers right now don't have anyone with that skill set to knock down passes consistently along the defensive line. Next up, Tiawan Mullen, cornerback from Indiana. Now, Tiawan was a 4-star high school prospect out of Florida, and at Indiana, he had 144 tackles, 9 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks, 5 interceptions, 33 pass deflections, and 4 forced fumbles. He is a physical and fast cornerback that is also a willing run defender, especially for his size, since he's only 5'8" and 180 pounds. He's very athletic with quick feet and good ball skills, and his brother is Trayvon Mullen, current Ravens cornerback, and his cousin is Lamar Jackson, current Ravens quarterback. So he's got NFL pedigree. Only issues with him are his size, and he lacks coverage awareness at times. He'll bite on fakes a lot, and he doesn't have good route recognition yet, but he can learn those things. He could absolutely compete for a job in this defensive backfield, and he might even earn himself some playing time. It depends on what Jasir Taylor does in preseason and in camp. I really like him, and I think he should earn himself a job on this roster, especially considering that guys his size have succeeded in the NFL at that position. Guys like Desmond King, Nicole Roby-Coleman. This is not something that you need to have huge size to be a defensive back in the NFL. Last but not least, AJ Uzodinma, cornerback from Ball State. A lot of cornerbacks. AJ was a 2-star high school prospect out of Florida where he played wide receiver and cornerback. He had 172 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 10 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles, and 44 pass deflections. This is a better zone corner than a man corner, and he has a ton of pass deflections, which are a result of him timing routes and reading and reacting very well. He's not a great athlete, as his RAS score was a 3.61, and he didn't grade particularly well in anything except his 10-yard split. And that is a good sign because that correlates directly to the production that he had in college with breaking on the ball, his short area quickness. If that same innate playmaking ability that he has can translate to the NFL, then he could also compete for a roster spot and some playing time. There are a lot of DBs that are competing for the same 1 or 2 jobs, and it's going to be interesting to see who starts to pull away in camp and the preseason. Let me know who your favorites are, and if you haven't seen my videos about the Chargers draft picks, you can click this right here. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you haven't seen this video right here, go ahead and click on that thing. Thanks for watching. Bye.